Hello and welcome to FunBikes TV. My name is James and today we're going to be doing a technical help video on how to remove your rear axle from a 49cc petrol mini quad, change your rear sprocket and also change your brake disc. To start off with, we're going to remove the rear wheel. You will need a 17mm socket to be able to undo the nut. Once you've removed the nut, you will need to slide the spacer and the washer off the rear axle and then slide off the rear wheel. We are now going to remove the rear chain guard, which you will need a 5mm Allen key for. We're now going to remove the bearing carrier on the chain side. For this you will need an 8mm spanner or socket. Slide off the axle spacer and then remove the rear wheel on the opposite side of the quad. And again sliding the axle spacer off the axle. Remove the brake disc guard and bearing carrier from that side of the quad using the 8mm spanner or socket. Loosen off the back axle using an Allen key to rotate the bearing carrier around till the chain becomes loose and then slide it off the sprocket. Disconnect the brake cable using a 10 spanner or socket and remove the brake cable from the caliper. Feed the brake cable through the caliper so that it is totally removed. And we need to undo the brake mounting bracket using an 8mm spanner. When we're ready to drop the axle out of the vehicle, slide the axle out and then remove the chain over the sprocket and slide the axle out from over that end. We're now ready to remove our brake side brake disc bearing using a 2.5mm Allen key into the grub screw. We don't need to fully remove the grub screw, we just need to loosen it. We will then be ready to remove the bearing carrier. To do this we will need a couple of tyre levers or prizing bars to be able to get it to move. They are quite tight at first. If you have a vice to hand, place your axle in a vice as it helps to hold it more firmly and makes it easier to remove. Sometimes you need to use a second tyre lever to allow you to have more prizing onto the bearing. Move it around so that you're working it off equally and it slides off smoothly. Once you've got the bearing carrier starting to move and bearing, it will then slide off nice and easily into your hand. To allow us to change the rear brake disc, we will need to remove the rear caliper and the mounting bracket for it. We will need a 4 Allen key and an 8mm spanner. Undo the 2 bolts that have 2 spacers on them to allow you to remove the caliper from the mounting bracket. Be careful not to lose the 2 small spacers that are on each bolt. Once you've removed the bolts and spacers, you're able to rotate the caliper carrier around and then slide the carrier off the axle along with the spacer. We are now ready to remove our brake disc and change it for a new one. So we need a Phillips screwdriver to undo the 3 Phillips screws that hold it onto the rear axle. Once you've removed all 3 bolts, you are then able to remove the brake disc from the axle. We are now ready to fit our new brake disc. Make sure the countersunk edge of the brake disc is on the outside for the bolt heads, and then replace your 3 screws into the carrier. And tighten them fully. We're now going to remove the axle bearing carrier and bearing off the sprocket side. You're again using a tyre lever. Once it has started to move, just as on the brake side, it will slide off nice and easily by hand. And then remove the washer from behind. Using a 4 Allen key, remove the 3 sprocket bolts that attach it to the centre carrier. Loosen all 3 bolts and then remove them fully. Once we've removed these, we are then able to slide our rear sprocket off the axle. We are now ready to fit our new sprocket to the axle. Align the sprocket holes with the bolt holes and then replace your bolts. Loosely fit them all and then tighten all fully. We are now ready to replace the bearing and bearing carrier onto our axle. To start with, slide the washer back onto the axle and then take your bearing, making sure that the edge with the lip on is on the inside towards the sprocket. Slide it onto the axle and push it on firmly. We are now ready to replace the mounting bracket onto the brake caliper side. So slide the spacer on, followed by the collar, and then replace the mounting bracket for the rear caliper. Slide the rear brake caliper over the brake disc and then align it with the mounting bracket. Using the bolts you removed earlier, replace them to hold the bracket into place. Make sure there's only 1 washer on the bolt at this point. Take the other spacer and slide it on from the opposite side and replace your nut. And repeat the process with the other bolt. Once you have both bolts in, you can then fully tighten up these 2 bolts. We are now ready to refit the bearing to the rear axle. Slide it on fully and then tighten the grub screw to hold it in position. Our back axle is now ready to replace into the vehicle. Slide the axle through the sprocket side of the chain so that the chain is on the inside of the sprocket, and then align the bearing carriers with the mounting points. Sliding your brake disc caliper so that it is on top of the bike and not underneath. Replace your brake disc guard at bearing mounting bracket. Tighten up the bolt until your axle is in the bike securely so that we can finish working on the caliper and the opposite side. We now need to attach our brake disc cable into the caliper. Feed your brake cable through the mounting point. You should be able to see on the brake cable approximately where it was tightened before, and position it in that place by moving the swing arm section of the caliper. Make sure it is sat firmly behind the nut so that it cannot slide out, and tighten the nut up using a 10 spanner. Once this is secure, we are ready to actually tighten the mounting bracket up using the bolt we removed earlier, making sure it is tightened fully. We're now ready to put the rear chain onto the vehicle. We may just need to rotate the bearing around slightly on one or both sides to allow us to adjust the tension to fit it on there. We are now ready to put the bearing carrier mounting bracket in place. When we tighten these up, make sure both sides at the top and bottom have an equal distance between them. We will now need to set the chain tension. Please follow the link to the video below on how to do this. Now we have set our chain tension, we are ready to reattach our chain guard using the 3 bolts we removed earlier. Loosely fit all 3 bolts first to allow us to align the chain correctly. Once we are happy with the alignment of the chain guard, we can then tighten all 3 bolts. We're now ready to replace the axle spacers and also the rear wheels. Once we've slid the wheel on, make sure that we slide the spacer on, then the washer, and then the nut. Fully tighten, making sure that you hold the rear brake when you tighten this nut up. And we're going to repeat the process on the opposite side, sliding our axle spacer on, the rear wheel, the spacer, followed by the washer, and then the nut. Again, tighten fully, holding the rear brake to make sure that these are absolutely solid on there when we tighten them, to avoid the wheels coming loose on the quad. We have now fully fitted our new axle into the vehicle, along with fitting a new brake disc and a new sprocket. Links for all the parts mentioned in the video are listed in the description below or are available at funbikes.co.uk. Many thanks for watching and let the fun begin.